It is Vlogmas Day 13 and it's time to talk about some of my most disappointing reads of the year. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is a Vlogmas video. I'm going to be posting a new video on my channel every day in December up to and including Christmas Day. It is a mixture of bookish and theatrical content. We're sticking with the bookish today. Once again, we're doing a classic of this time of year and we're going to talk about some of my most disappointing reads of 2022. Now I'm going to preface this by saying a couple of things. Number one, I am probably going to mention some books that some people really enjoy and I'm sorry that our opinions differ. I'm not going to be like needlessly harsh about anything, but these books just didn't work for me for whatever reason. And we all have different opinions, and that's one of the things that makes reading fun, because people can read the exact same story and have completely different reactions to it. Number two, these ones are my most disappointing reads of the year. They are not necessarily my worst reads of the year. A lot of these are actually 3-star ratings, but there is a reason why I was expecting them to be more, and I always find that it's actually worse for me when I've had really high hopes for something and it just doesn't quite meet that mark. Like I think one of these books on here may actually be a 4-star rating, but I was just expecting so much from it that it not being this sort of new all-time favourite really disappointed me, and I'll get to that in a bit. But now we've got the disclaimer out of the way, let's actually just talk about some books that sadly were a bit disappointing for me this year. So these ones aren't in any particular order in terms of like how much I disliked them. They are in the order of when I read them, because I went down my spreadsheet and picked them out one at a time, like starting from January. I was like, okay, which one's the most disappointing? I have 5 books here to talk about, and the first one is one that I just really thought I was going to enjoy because I'd seen some of my friends enjoy it and I didn't hate it, which is going to be a theme with all of these, but sadly it just wasn't everything that I wanted it to be, and that is Cinderella is Dead by Caitlin Bayron. I've had this one for a while. I've had it pretty much since it came out. I feel like I read this for some sort of read along. It may have been the Recreate Book Club, but I could be wrong. But I definitely did read it going in hoping that I would like it. One, because the storyline just sounded like something that I would be interested in. Also, I do know that Becca really enjoys this one, and I was optimistic about it, but I just felt like something to do with the pacing of the story was off. It kind of felt like nothing really happened. I just remember a lot of sort of like travelling out of the town to do something, but then nothing actually happening, and then travelling back into the town, and then eventually like a confrontation happened, but it just felt like it took a long time for us to get there. And if the point was supposed to be that like it didn't actually matter necessarily what the plot was too much and that it was all around the characters, that's fine for me in some books, but I have to like really like the characters, and I didn't love these ones enough. I read this a while ago now, so I'm fuzzy on specifics, but I do just remember it was very much like a pacing and the stakes sort of didn't feel high enough for a lot of it. It felt like everything needed fleshing out a little bit more. I am still willing to give this author another chance. I do have this Poison Heart to read. I may just go in with slightly lower expectations though, and then hopefully that one won't make the list next year. All the rest of them now, the reason why they're disappointing is I've read books from these authors before, really loved them, and then expected their other books to be the same, and sadly they weren't. So the first one is An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X. Arpan. The Astonishing Colour of After by this author is one of my favourite books. It's all about grief. It's got some magical elements in there, but it's not like a full-blown fantasy. It's just a really beautifully written book, and like I said, one of my favourites. I was expecting this one to also be one of my favourites, and there are things about it that I really loved that are similar to what I really loved about The Astonishing Colour of After. Like the writing is really beautiful. There is an element of magic in here, but again, it's not like a full-blown fantasy book. The thing is with this one though is that I feel like the fantasy part is a bit bigger, especially in like the latter half of the book, and I wish that she'd actually done more with that. Like it felt like once that got started I was having a good time, but the build up to it took so long that I just wasn't as invested. I do also think this one was marketed a little bit wrong. It's marketed mainly as a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it's also inspired by Chinese mythology, and it's part based on Chinese mythology where the magic system comes into it, and that's the part that I really enjoyed, and I felt like it just needed to lean a little bit heavier into that. Once I sort of got on board with that part of the storyline, like I said, I had a great time, but the beginning part where it felt like it was trying to be more of a Romeo and Juliet retelling felt a little bit flat. So this one, by the way, still got a 4-star rating. I think Cinderella is Dead was a 3-star. I can't remember specifically off the top of my head, but it feels like a 3-star. This one was a 4-star, but I'm just sad that it wasn't that 5-star new all-time favourite that her first book was. The next one is one that I don't actually have because I already unhauled it, but this one I feel like I'd sort of built it up more in my head by not reading it for quite a while. So it is Into the Crooked Place by Alexandra Christo. I had previously read To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. I remember really loving that one at the time. I went out and bought this one as soon as it came out. I was very excited for the series, and then for some reason just didn't pick it up. And then my tastes have changed since I got it, so that sort of stopped me from picking it up afterwards, because it's like YA fantasy isn't necessarily what I reach for. But then it ended up being picked as a book to read for Gemma Lisa's podcast, and I was actually the guest that month, so I read it as well. And when I started reading it, I was like, okay, so it's not necessarily like the YA fantasy that I would reach for these days, but I really liked something from this author previously, so I've got really high hopes for this one. And I think part of the problem is, again, because my tastes have changed so much, I don't even know if I would like the other book that I read from this author if I was to read it for the first time now. And I think I'd sort of built it up in my head that I really, really enjoyed To Kill a Kingdom. And I'm like, but did I? Like, I don't know for definite. So that meant that I was automatically disappointed when I didn't love this one. It was a 3-star, it was fine. It was just, again, like I didn't care about any of the characters too much. I didn't feel like there's a lot of characters in there, and I didn't feel like the characterization of any of them was particularly strong. Like, there have been a lot of comparisons to Six of Crows from it, and I don't think those are necessarily warranted. I think it is a very different storyline, but I can see that you're going to compare two books where they're about like a group of characters doing a heist, and one of those book series has characters where I love all 6 of them individually and together, and one of them has characters where I can't even tell you what all the names are, and I think that's why it was just a disappointing read for me this year. And then the last 2 to talk about are continuations of series where they just haven't lived up to the ones that I read before, which is very, very sad. First one being a concluding part of a duology as well, which is even worse. So that is A Psalm of Storms and Silence by Roseanne Brown. I read A Song of Rifts and Ruin, I think last year, maybe the year before. I really, really loved that book. I gave it 5 stars. It had a really interesting premise about these 2 people who both had been tasked with killing each other, but they didn't know they'd both been tasked with that, and the way to get close to each other was through this competition where one of them was competing for the hand of marriage of the other one, and it was just a really well done book. And it did not, and then this happened, and it just dragged the story out way too long. Like, it felt like we'd sort of had the ending of that competition in the first book, and then it just felt like the beginning of this book was just a lot of waiting around for the actual final conflict to happen. And that would be fine if they were doing like a lot of character building and you were sort of seeing the relationship between these 2 main characters again, but also they were separated for a fair amount of it. And when the first book felt like sort of really dynamic and like something was already happening, this just felt like we'd come to a sudden halt, and I did not have a great time with it. I can't remember if I ended up giving it a 3 or a 4 star. It's not like, again, it's not like one of the worst things I've ever read. It was just because I love that first one so much, this just felt very disappointing in comparison to that. And then the last book I'm going to talk about, I've realised actually I had very similar criticisms for. It was The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. Now again, this is sitting between a 3-star and a 4-star. For the majority of the book it's 3-star, but then I really, really love the ending. This is the middle book in a series, because it could be setting up for a really good conclusion to this trilogy. But again, the first book felt very dynamic, very exciting. Things were constantly happening with this group of initiates into the Alexandria Society. There was all this academic talk going on, there was lots of backstabbing between each other. Things just seemed to constantly be happening. And at the end of that book, like, the situation was left in like a very particular way, and then it felt like in this book there was no real movement on that until, again, towards the very end of the book. It felt like this event had happened and nobody was really pushing too much for like it to be for anything to happen like with any urgency about it. Like, people were just like, okay, well, we're here now, let's just carry on with our research projects. And in the meantime, I'm like, you do remember that you need to sort this out, right? Like I said though, where everything's left at the end of this one could mean that there's going to be a really amazing conclusion to this trilogy, and it might be that if I reread them all in one go, I don't worry about the pacing of this one because that ending like ties it all together and it's so good. But I do just worry that this is going to be the same thing in the third one, is it's going to start off really slow paced and then eventually we'll have like a satisfying conclusion, but it overall won't feel like it's been a satisfying book. You can't really count it as being like a great book if it's only like the last third of it that's actually really holding your attention. I really hate talking about things that I don't like in books, especially having to do it like all in one go like that, which is why I kept this list very small. I mean, to be honest, there weren't too many others I could have included on this list. Like, there were other ones I didn't like, but I didn't necessarily have the highest hopes for them anyway. And yeah, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet because I don't like talking about books that I didn't love. So that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know what your biggest disappointment was this year, and I will see you guys tomorrow with a new video. Bye.